EOSV does and what the program's initiatives are. Earlier this year, Block 1 announced the EOSVC initiative, where we're going to stake over $1 billion into joint venture JV funds around the world. And the point of these funds is to invest in projects developing on the EOSIO blockchain. The largest part of this initiative is that we're going to have these fund managers around the world who are investing in DApps, and they each have their own specialty and uniqueness as they're investing in projects. Now, I want to move on to something a little more exciting that relates to everyone here who's hacking this weekend. I know everyone's excited to get their project started, but if you can bear with me for just a few minutes, I'm going to give you some advice and some new announcements that are going to make your weekend a little more exciting. The EOS Global Hackathon is a great way to bring together developers, designers, and entrepreneurs who love EOSIO, and we want to show our dedication and commitment to these community members that travel all across the world to these different locations, and we want to make sure that we leave a lasting footprint here in Australia and all the other locations that we're going to this year. So that's why we're announcing our latest initiative of Hack, Pitch, Launch. With Hack, Pitch, Launch, we're focusing on providing seed funding to teams building this weekend, and we want to see that their ideas become a reality. With this initial investment, teams are able to take the opportunity to dive deep into their work and focus on the projects and work towards building their DApps and get them off the ground, and we want to provide them support to make sure that they succeed along the way. So with that, EOSVC is committing $250,000 to each of our events of the 4 hackathons, and we'll be awarding $50,000 to 5 teams to get their projects going. These investments are in addition to the prize money that all teams are eligible to win, and will be awarded separately from that prize after this weekend's final demo day. To make sure that the seed funding is going to where it's needed most, we're focusing on investing in new ideas, unfunded projects that are being developed here this weekend. We're also investing in the ideas and the teams, so we're keeping the requirements simple. You need to have an executable EOSIO smart contract and must submit your project by tomorrow's deadline. We want to streamline the investment process also, so we're going to keep things simple here too. This starts with the selection process. The top 10 teams from tomorrow will automatically receive a sit-down request from EOSVC to speak one-on-one with the team to try to pitch their idea to receive the $50,000 investment. We're also going to use a standard term sheet for this investment, which to make sure that things go quicker and get you started as soon as possible on working on your DApp to make it a reality. In addition to the investment, EOSVC and the Block 1 team is committed to helping these projects launch and will be hands-on throughout the development and launch of the programs. So be on the lookout on the Slack channel for more information, and we're really excited to see what you guys build this weekend. So the entrepreneur workshop today is going to focus on hacking the perfect pitch. And this is a part where a lot of people stumble on because they are afraid to talk about money, or they don't know what information to put forth to individuals that they're speaking to. So I want to give you a little bit of advice and a little bit of tips from my experience on being on the investor side of things that I need and want to hear from projects when they're pitching to me their ideas. And so today's workshop, we're going to just dive into a few things that make up what your perfect pitch is. And there's 3 of them. So there's the 30-second elevator pitch, the 2-minute fundraising pitch, and finally the pitch deck. Now these seem pretty simple, and most of you think you have them down, but I can tell you from the investor standpoint, a lot of times what you're saying doesn't resonate to us, and we're not able to understand what you want to hear and how we can make a difference for your project. So to start, we're going to go over the elevator pitch. This one, again, sounds very simple, 30 seconds, but while it seems to be a no-brainer for most, in my experience on the investor side, this is where many teams stumble and they aren't able to share with you what their purpose is. So the perfect elevator pitch is something that you're essentially going to use to ensure your success. It's going to be the tool that you use to tell everyone you meet whether or not they want to listen, what your project's doing, and how they're getting it done. You also have to make this pitch so amazing that they can't help but want to get involved in your project. So to break it down, the components of your elevator pitch are simple. You want to keep it short and simple with 30 seconds, no more than 4 sentences. Your first sentence is also easy. You just tell them what your company does. Don't go into any long-winded explanations with technical jargon or anything. Just tell them exactly what it does and keep it out of the industry. So for example, you say, we track rewards points for credit card companies. That's it. Anyone here understands what that project is doing, and you don't need to get into any more detail. The next one is to keep things simplified on this trend and move on to the second sentence. And here you're going to identify the problem you're looking to solve. So again, building on an example of reward points, you're going to say that in order to reduce labor costs, you're going to reduce labor costs and processing delays. Again, you didn't use any technical jargon, you didn't get too complex, you simply stated the answer to the problem you first stated. Now that you have the listening, you want to jump to the market size. And this is what's really going to grab their attention because they can see how big this idea or this project is for their portfolio. You don't want to use any formulas or cite resources, just give them an easy, digestible piece of information that they can understand. So the example is, in this example you would say, which is focusing on the $4 billion a year rewards industry. So your closing sentence is what you're just going to use as your hook to lock them in and get them eager to do a follow-up talk with you. This is, again, very simple and keep it very direct. You're going to state, we're currently working on an MVP, and we have 6 airline partners who are all running 10,000 transactions a day. That's it. So in those 4 sentences, you were able to state your purpose, your solution, how you're getting there, and what you've done so far. So any investor who's listening to that 30-second pitch is going to say, hey, can we grab a call real quick next week, or jump in a meeting and just go a little further deep into your project. A lot of times, this elevator pitch comes off as technical jargon, how they're building a new technology, and I'm not able to, on the spot, say this is something I want to look deeper into. So the whole point is you want to make sure that the investor has a little nugget of information that they want to follow up with later on. So after they talk, as you finish this talk, you can see that there's positive response from individuals. And sometimes you may not get that positive response. So what you want to do is you want to refine this pitch over and over and over again. One of the ways you do that, people say it's the friendship pitch or the mom pitch, where you go to someone who has no technical experience whatsoever, doesn't know the industry you're in, and you literally say the 30-second pitch to them and see what the reaction is. At the end of the 30-second pitch, if your mom knows what you're doing, at the end of the day, you successfully delivered this elevator pitch. If your mom has no idea what you're doing and she's asking what blockchain is, again, you've messed up. You need to go back to the drawing board and work out those 4 sentences. It sounds very simple, but I can promise you most people don't get this pitch right. So once you land this and you're able to get that first meeting, you're going to move on to the fundraising pitch. Again, the starting point from here is that 30-second pitch. You're going to use those 4 sentences to start building a longer 2 to 3 minute pitch. And from here, it's, again, very simple. You're going to actually disclose in your 2-minute pitch what your secret weapon is. And most people are very scared to do this, but I assure you, no investor is walking around with a notebook trying to take down all the secrets that everyone's trying to do and is going to replicate this project. I can tell you, investors are not looking to become developers. They solely want to invest in projects and help you get off the ground, but they can't invest with you unless they know what you're doing. So here, you're going to start off by giving that secret weapon. You're going to say that it's a blockchain or that you built a protocol. You're just going to drop that little tidbit without getting too technical, but just make sure that they're able to latch on to something again. And then you're going to go into your revenue model. A lot of times people will sit down with me and they'll explain what's going on with their project, how they're going to solve it, and then end the conversation. And I don't know how they're going to make the revenue. It's a big question that from an investor standpoint, you need to know what this company is going to live off of and how they're going to grow. While I'm giving money, a capital investment, whether it's seed round or Series A or Series D, I need to know that this company is going to be able to survive once that money runs out. So that's where you explain your revenue model. If it's advertising, feel comfortable saying it's advertising. Don't be ashamed that you're making a blockchain software that has an advertising model component to it. Or if you're going to have a subscription model, that's totally fine. But a lot of people in their presentations, especially from their last hackathon, exclude this line. They don't say how they're making money. And you will see on the tapes from the last hackathon, judges ask, how are you going to earn revenue? And while it seems like you would always include it, a lot of people are afraid to put that information there because you may not have it. So don't be afraid to sit back and think about that answer before you go in for the fundraising pitch. And the next one is your founders. Most of these projects that are going up to investments, especially in the seed stage or early stage investments, are just ideas. They're not a concrete business. They don't have a revenue model. So a lot of times the investors are looking at the team. If there's success or there's achievements that the founders have had over their career, you need to highlight that. You just want to do a single line, single bullet point for each mentor or each founder and talk about what they've done in the past because you invest in those opportunities. So whether it's the company or an announcement or a product you develop, just highlight it where the investor is able to say, this guy's legitimate, he's succeeded in the past, or he's launched a previous company. And finally, when you're closing out the 2 to 3 minute pitch, you need to actually hit on the money talk. This is, again, the item that most people are afraid to approach. It's a little awkward in conversation to sometimes say that you're looking for $20 million for 20% because you feel that you're giving up too much in the conversation. But I assure you, no investor wants to ask you, how much are you looking to give or what are you looking to raise? This is where you actually control the narrative and you're able to say that you want an equity investment for 20% for $20 million. You give yourself that valuation, and that's a starting point for the investor to then work from and help valuate your company, because you're going to have to come to terms with them on what the value of your company is, because no one's going to agree off the bat. So those are the verbal pitches you have. You have the 30-second that takes you into your 2 to 3 minute, and after that 3-minute pitch, you're usually able to get down and get a meeting with that VC fund or that private equity firm. And that's where you got to have your pitch deck. And with your pitch deck, I've seen pitch decks that range from 2 pages to well over 70 pages. And this is no secret. I have a sample of this up on the VC website. Everyone's free to download the Google Doc that has these slides. And I assure you, if you use these 12 slides that are catered a little bit towards the blockchain model, it makes your presentation to any VC, investor, family office 1,000 times better. I'll break down each slide, but what you're doing is you're giving them the story from start to finish and show them how they're part of the conversation, rather than going on a lengthy topic discussion of how your token's different than all the other tokens. Because I can assure you, every single person has that conversation, but it doesn't matter to the investor. The investor cares about different things. So to start, there's the summary page. This is where you're going to quickly use that 30-second pitch that you've developed already. You're going to reiterate those 4 lines into a paragraph form, and you're going to state what your mission is. You're going to outline what your company is, how they're solving the problem, how big the market is, and how they're going to generate revenue. The next, you're going to go into the problem phase. You're going to expand upon this. You're going to talk about how the airline industry's points system is slow, and there's offline databases, and there's a lot of loss, and there's a whole team of people at that airline that aren't able to accurately track revenue or the cost of doing these airline points. So you want to just touch on that and make them see what the problem is and why they should be interested in investing in this solution. The next is your target user. So here you're going to identify 2 or 3 key target users or customers of your product. You're going to identify the attributes they have, why they're your target customer, and that they also have revenue to spend on such a solution. And again, you're going to talk about your secret weapon. So when you go into your secret weapon, don't be afraid to share information, because a lot of what you're using are existing tools, and all you're doing is repurposing them for another use. So if you're saying that you're using a blockchain solution and having timed algorithms, or using an oracle to check what the status of the temperature is, that's a known solution. Don't be afraid to disclose that, because a lot of times teams work in such secrecy that they don't explain how they're going to solve their problem to their investor, and their investors can't get on board. You need to onboard your investors the earliest you can in your pitch deck, or they're not going to get to the end. And again, this is only 12 pages. It should only take a few minutes to go through, but I can guarantee you, if you lose the investor in the first 5 pages, they're never going to reach that last page, and they're probably not going to follow up with you. So jumping from that is going to go to your market size. And this is where people get a little carried away. A lot of times if I open a pitch deck and they say that they're going to disrupt a $20 trillion industry, I can't get on board, because I don't know of a single company that's disrupted a $20 trillion industry overnight. You got to start a little bit smaller and a little bit digestible before you go to taking on the Amazons of the world. So here you're going to give quantifiable and qualifiable data of what target your market is and how big it is and what the overall reach of your app is. And then the next one, this is a slide that most people skip over. It's actually listing your competitors. Who else is in the market? Who else is in this space? What other products exist? And what the current solution is. Don't be afraid to list these, because what you're going to do is you're going to highlight how other people have tried to solve this problem, and you're going to end the slide with how you actually solved it and why you're better than the rest. So giving that comparison to the other projects is why they're going to make the investment in you rather than going to your competition. The next one's a little hard for some teams if they don't have the next 2 are hard for teams if they don't have the best financial backing. But whether it's a VC team that you're friends with, a friend who works in finance, or just anyone you can get your hands on, they can help you with these finances, and they're pretty simple, and we put up some tips online to kind of walk people through road mapping and revenue models. So I kind of tie them together. But first, what road mapping is, This is where you need to kind of show how you're going to use your money and what your company is going to do over the next 6, 12, and 18 months. Well, that seems simple, where people put bullet points of launch Q1, revenue Q2, grow Q3. That's not enough for an investor to really have assurance that you know what you're doing. You're just listing out the 4 quarters of a calendar year and saying you're going to do things. You need to put actual revenue numbers and actual cost numbers associated with each of these milestones, and that gets them on board that they know that you're going to be smart with the money that they're about to hand over. So this ties into the revenue model. Again, it's not hard. It's a simple P&L or a simple budget or a simple projection where you're showing what you think your revenue costs are going to be year 1, year 2, and how much you're going to think that you're going to make when you're going to hit profitability. This is a number that shouldn't have to be determined by the investor, because I guarantee you the investors are going to lowball you. What you want to do is you want to give justifiable numbers to each of those attributes: your cost, your revenue, and profits. From there, your investor is able to then build their own model on this data and figure out what your valuation is if you get to that point. But without providing them this sample data, they're going to take the worst case scenario and give you the least legitimacy in your claim. So again, this is where you are in charge of the narrative, so you want to start earlier. And the next slide is unique to blockchains. This is the token economics. Don't go into too much detail. Give a very concrete data. You want to talk about if you have inflation, if there's a burn, if there are certain attributes, if you're a utility token. You want to highlight those points, but what you don't want to do is you don't want to show me an equation on a sheet with no variable explanations. I don't want to see long details crammed in a sheet in 6-point font and have no idea what I'm looking at. That's a second document. When I read through this model, if I have a great conversation with you and I'm looking to do a second talk, I'll ask for your token model document. So keep that separate. Give me your token economics, very simplistic, very understandable. If I know that the token is going to be used in a utility transaction to track the airline miles and that there's going to be 7-point inflation over the years, that's fine. That's all I need to know, and I can dig into the model later on. The next one, again, is the founders. This is where you go into a little bit longer format about your founders, and you're going to talk about what they do, why they're investable. Because again, this investment's actually going for your investors and your team, not so much the company that's not making revenue yet. So I'm investing in founders 90% of the time. So I want to see that the investors have, again, launched the product, have done good work, are part of teams, or have a good network themselves. And again, on your financials, this is where we're going to list what your projected costs are. A lot of times people say that to get to launch, they need $20 million. I can tell you it doesn't cost $20 million to launch a blockchain in 6 months. You need to get a little more realistic with your costs sometimes, because people get a little carried away. So make sure that your financials of just how much it's going to cost are indicative of what it's actually going to be expected. Because if I see a plan that says it's going to cost $30 million for 3 months worth of work, it's not a project I want to touch, because it seems like you're going to burn through your capital within a matter of months. And finally, it's the money talk. This is, again, reiterating the point from your fundraising pitch, where you're going to talk about why you need $20 million for 20% of your company and what you're going to do with it. This is the sheet that most investors keep on hand, where they circle the numbers and they write their own math. And this is what actually is the most impactful for when asking for an investment, because I don't want to be left with having to follow up with you, asking you what you want from me. So this is your chance to start at the beginning. Tell me what you want, tell me how you want to structure the deal, and I can then work from there. Because if I start, I'm going to lowball you with numbers, and I'm not going to give you the valuation you're looking for. So again, the fundraising tips that most people need to get a little pointers on is highlight your established success. So if you've already started building your company, talk about that. Don't give an investor a very vague idea that says that you've built a product. Talk about the product. Talk about that you've done transactions. Talk about that you have beta users. Don't be afraid to share your product with other individuals and let them test it out. Without that, there's no proof of concept. I need to be able to go to those people who've demoed your project, who have sampled your code, and those people will tell me as the investor, this is great. This is better than any other solution I've seen. Because if you operate in too much stealth mode, no one's going to be able to justify your project. In science, this is peer reviews. You want to have someone who's unrelated to you verify and stand up for your project. And again, the other part is the necessary runway. How much does it cost you to operate? I cannot stress that enough, especially in the blockchain and crypto space. People ask for some crazy valuations, and I'm sure you all here have read on different websites or different news feeds how much people are asking to raise in a token model. You may need to get that a little more realistic. If you're looking for a company that's going to generate a revenue of no more than $10 million a year, you don't need $20 million to start. You need to get a little more realistic, bootstrap yourself, run a little leaner, but VC funds, angel investors, or private equity firms are more than happy to help you get there, but just realize you need to keep your costs in line with what's expected. So you're not going to be taking the crazy trips or flying private. You're going to be operating more in a realistic sense. So go back to the models of yesteryear where you're actually bootstrapping yourself and putting your product first, not your brand and not your egos. And again, you want to showcase the committed team. This is where you talk about the team's involvement and team's contributions, that you show that the team is going to be there long term and is going to be involved with the project. These are guys who are showing that they built things and showing how they built them. And again, is having a dedicated fundraiser. A lot of times, the whole team of 5 is going to go out fundraising. But I can tell you that's not the best, because when you have only 5 people on your team and everyone's fundraising, you have no one building your product. And I cannot tell you how many times I've talked to a team in January, followed up with them in June, and asked them for a status update to see if it's getting ready time to make an investment. And I've asked them what they've done. It's the same project, it's the same deck, they haven't done a trial, they haven't launched, and I asked them why that is, and they said that we've been so busy on fundraising, and I cannot stress to you guys enough to not do that. To take one person from your team and dedicate them to fundraising, and have the rest of the team focusing on the product, because at the end of the day, that's what you're getting the investment for, is the product. So every day you should be taking a step forward. You shouldn't be focusing on fundraising your whole team. You should only have that one fundraiser who knows the business inside and out, and is able to give the best story to the investors. And with that, that's kind of the end of the 3 pitches that you guys need to put into your toolbox, but I want to see if you guys have any questions, or I can answer any experiences from relating to the investments that we're going to do through Hack Pitch Launch or the EOSVC as a whole.
Yeah, I've just got a question on timing. So things like, bed and breakfast type places, Airbnb, that was the right timing. Do you have some examples of investments that you have seen that have been on the blockchain and were there at the right time?
Right. So there's not always the right time. Like Airbnb, when Brian started it, no one gave him credit. Like he very publicly lists the 5 VC funds who denied his investment. Like he put those online, redacted the names, and he showed that people didn't think it was the right time for people moving into people's homes and renting them for a weekend. So you have to make your time, and you have to make it present, make the present the time for your investment. So they actually pushed the narrative, and he talked about it and did the examples. And so with the blockchain, I definitely think things that are scalable, would have large data sets, or have like large usability, that's going to be strong. And the other thing that's great for blockchains is when you have projects that necessarily the end user doesn't know it's on the blockchain. If you're doing a DApp and it's keeping records of these airline points I keep talking about, the end user who's flying on Delta, let's say, doesn't need to know that their airline points were stuck on a blockchain. That's not for them to know. So that's for you to sell to the consumer, which is actually the airline company, not the end consumer. So that's, if that kind of helps you with the timing, is there's always the right time. You just need to find out who the customer is for you.
Thank you so much. One quick question about the pitch deck. I didn't see any slide dedicated to the product and use cases. Is it voluntary, and to which extent should we talk about this?
So that would be more like your secret weapon. That's where you're talking about the use cases, where you can say, you're going to go into that. So your secret weapon is how you're doing it, what you're doing it, and what you're doing it with. Normally you would say that like you wouldn't divulge a tiny little piece of information that's like what's your most marketable trait. That's in that secret weapon slide where you actually would give all that information. So.
Thanks for the information, really helpful. But I just wanted to clarify that the 2 to 3 minute pitch suggestion that you were recommending, that's more for the follow-up meetings with the EOSVC funds and not necessarily recommendations for the final pitches for the hackathon.
Correct.
Because I think, yeah, okay.
Right. So, yeah, so Brian's going to handle the pitch workshop later tonight. That's the pitching for here. This is more for you, the 30 seconds you meet someone on the street and he's like, hey, like, let's do a call. That 2 to 3 minutes, your initial 2 to 3 minutes of that call, just to kind of get them on board, and then you can answer their questions.
Perfect, thanks.
Hey, thanks for coming. You mentioned on the slide you wanted to mention the token economics, but does the idea that we pitch necessarily have to have a token economic involvement?
Nope. So I totally, to not cut you off, but I totally like the idea that blockchain can be separated from token. Token is just your serial number that you're using to transact on a decentralized ledger. That's all you're doing. But I totally understand if projects don't have it. I actually prefer those because I'm actually investing in the technology, not the token.
Sorry, I missed your first part of the speech. How do you, what's the process, application process, and pitching process?
For the
VC,
for the
250.
Right, so for Hack Pitch Launch, that's going to be in the Slack channel. There's going to be a link to everyone here that they're going to be able to go and just sign up for. So that's your choice. If you want to participate, you basically go, you're going to submit your team name, your team members, and an email address. And at the end of the competition, we're going to go through the pitch decks and we're going to invite teams to pitch to us very quickly. So it's open to everyone. We just don't want to say that everyone's forced to do it because not everyone's interested in taking their projects. But those that are, we'll make it available to you.
So are we preparing the elevator pitch and the 5-minute presentation? Are we preparing it on top of the presentation, like the final pitches?
So yeah, so to sort of break that down, the pitch that you're doing for the end of the competition, that is Brian's leading that conversation. What I gave you is like, let's say you actually want to go for the Hack Pitch launch, that's what you would use that information for.
And is every team invited to come to the VC?
Yep. So you're going to sign up online, there's a form you're going to fill out, and from there you're just going to put your email address, we're going to go through your deck and watch your presentation, and then ask if we want to do a follow-up round with you.
So is the EOS VC mandate to only invest in projects that have EOS token value, see the EOS token value appreciate, or there could be a project that's built on a different application or has a different, basically on a side chain?
Right.
Could
so
we still invest in those?
Right. So we're not investing in the EOS token. We're only investing in projects that are using the EOS.io software. So if you can if you want to download the Docker image like you are today and running a native app on your computer and doing that, we can invest in that. It doesn't have to be on the mainnet. It could be any utilization of the software. Any other questions? Thank you guys. Appreciate the time.